안녕하십니까? 제20회 제주포럼에 참석해주신 여러분, 지금부터 글로벌 불확실성 속 다자경제협력 증진 세션을 시작하겠습니다. 원활한 행사 진행을 위해서 휴대전화는 매너 모드로 전환해 주시길 바랍니다. 본 행사는 한국어, 영어, 일본어로 동시 진행됩니다. 통역을 원하시는 분들께서는 자리에 놓여진 통역기를 착용하시기 바랍니다. 한국어는 1번, 영어는 2번, 일본어는 3번입니다.
Please make sure your cell phone is either off or on silent mode. Simultaneous interpretation in Korean, English, and Japanese is provided in this session. If you would like interpretation, please use the receiver provided at your seat. Korean is channel 1, English is channel 2, Japanese is channel 3.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We are now starting today's last session. My name is Kyung-lim Choi, and I'm very much honored to moderate this session, where we are going to discuss advancing multilateral economic cooperation amidst global uncertainties. I think that it is fair to say that our topic today is quite a difficult one because many observers in international affairs believe that the era of cooperation is now over, primarily because major powers have been engaged in fierce strategic competition for some time. And America First policies of the Trump administration is making it much more difficult to advance international cooperation. Nevertheless, a world where international cooperation is absent is in the long term not a sustainable one. We cannot address challenges that we face today, like climate change, the movement of migrants and refugees across the borders, pandemics, and digital transformation without international cooperation. So our challenge is to narrow the gaps between the realities of our world and our aspirations for international cooperation. And it is thus imperative for us to continue to explore ways to advance international cooperation. Today, I think we have an excellent group of panelists who will touch upon these issues. On my left, we have Ambassador Dianjani of Indonesia, who was co-chair of G20 Sherpa's group during Indonesia's G20 presidency in 2022. And to his right, we have Mr. Scott Snyder, president of Korea Economic Institute of the United States. And third, we have Dr. An Sung-bae, vice president of KIEP. And finally, we have Mr. Ken England, Director of Northeast Asia Division, Global Affairs of Canada. So I would like to welcome all panelists to our discussion, and I will briefly explain how we are going to proceed in our session today. First, each panelist will be given 10 minutes to make his presentation. And after we finish the initial presentation of panelists, I will intend to ask each panelist a couple of questions. Then each panelist will have about 7 or 8 minutes to answer my questions, but they can also take advantage of this time to respond to the presentation of other panelists or add to what he said during the initial presentation. And after this second round of discussion, if we have time left, I'm going to open the floor to the audience and try to accommodate several questions. We are expected to finish at 6:40 sharp, so I would like to ask panelists to please keep the time limit during the initial presentation as well as during the second discussion. Please remember that you can always come back to issues that you are going to address during the second discussion, which you missed in your original presentation. So with this, I'm going to give the floor to the panelists. First, I will ask Mr. Scott Snyder to give his presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Cha, and it's a really great pleasure to be here for the Jeju Forum and also to be here at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs session. This was a challenge for me to prepare for this panel because the first thing I noticed, first of all, the title is very optimistic, Advancing Multilateral Economic Cooperation Amid Global Uncertainty. But then the second thing I noticed as I looked at the panel and the panelists is that there are 3 major multilateral economic cooperation institutions, and there are 4 panelists. And so we have someone representing the G20, the G7, and APEC, and then there's me. And I guess that I'm supposed to be representing the Trump administration, I don't know. But in any event, this was a challenging topic because it's kind of hard to find good news. We're about a decade into what Ian Bremmer referred to as the G0 world, or a world in which there is no single country or coalition that provides effective international leadership. John Eikenberry's visions of a liberal international order are out of fashion. In Washington, the rhetoric of a values and rules-based international order invoked by the Biden administration has evaporated. In the Trump era, we are consumed by tariffs, uncertainty, volatility, and a propensity to leverage geopolitical and geoeconomic risk to achieve national objectives. I think it's also worth noting that the Biden administration did not reverse Trump's initial exit from the global trading system. The political landscape in the United States has been reshaped, and both parties compete for voters that favor protectionism. The G20 thrived in the face of the 2008-2009 economic crisis, but its influence and relevance has steadily dissipated since that time. The meeting continues, but its relevance has declined. In times like this, when uncertainty prevails, policymakers and businesses look for answers. This could be an opportunity to reassert the G20's relevance. Also, I note 2 Peterson Institute scholars, David Feldman and Gary Hofbauer, have recently pointed out that the GATT principles of non-discrimination and national treatment at the core of global economic growth in recent decades are being set aside. The WTO's mechanisms charged with ensuring fairness of the trade rules of the game, notably the WTO Appellate Court, are paralyzed. Instead, fairness is being replaced by self-interest, opening the way to economic reversals and the vulnerability to severe downturns. As the U.S. undermines the WTO and the principle of non-discrimination, the global economic system moves from trade creation to trade diversion. As regarding APEC, I remember the 1990s and the Bogor Declaration, the goal of the free trade area of the Asia-Pacific. That was supposed to be achieved by 2020, but the date has passed, and the successor institutions, the CPTPP and the RCEP, have differing memberships, and neither has lived up to their names. The G7, I think, is the institution that remains the most relevant contributor to global governance, but it is a poor replacement for the paralyzed United Nations Security Council. It's a coalition of the wealthy that aspires to provide public goods but with limited resources, incomplete representation, and contested legitimacy. But I think the biggest challenge, really, to multilateral economic cooperation is the reversal of all of these, is that the reversal of all of these institutions are symptoms of darker trends in international geopolitics. Rising geopolitical confrontation is paralyzing international institutions like the UNSC. The ideal of a mutually beneficial global exchange based on maximum efficiency is being blocked as trade and supply chains become securitized and its economic interdependence becomes weaponized. Additionally, domestic interest groups increasingly depart from liberal values and gravitate to a zero-sum view of the world instead. The global economic system is characterized by fragmentation and uncertainty. Businesses postpone long-term investments, awaiting clarity, reordering supply chains, and catalyzing technology competition. As clarity replaces uncertainty, the economic system will adapt in some sense, but increased protectionism should lead to lower productivity and competitiveness overall. In such an environment, the advancement of multilateral economic cooperation is aspirational, but the protection of supply chains among trusted partners has become paramount. Now, Trump administration policies have provided a catalyst for the challenge and even reversal of the multilateral economic cooperation in the following ways. One, the application of higher tariffs for the purposes of raising government revenue, generating bargaining leverage, inducing U.S. reindustrialization, and punishment has been poorly applied in ways that ignore or violate bilateral and multilateral free trade arrangements, such as UMCA and KORUS. Second, the president's efforts to capitalize on geopolitical and geoeconomic risk as a source of leverage are premised on the assumption that others with lesser risk tolerance will back down. But this approach risks some of the very attributes that have underpinned U.S. international leadership for decades. Third, the implementation of the policy has damaged U.S. credibility and increased the likelihood of hedging, diversification, and risk reduction by U.S. partners, reducing U.S. capacity for international leadership. As the U.S. is increasingly perceived as an unreliable partner, other nations may explore other cooperations with like-minded nations. The tipping point for a shift to a new order is being tested, but it's not yet known. On the one hand, the U.S. could maintain influence through coercion. On the other hand, U.S. leadership in multilateral cooperation may decline, leaving a vacuum for other nations to fill at a regional level, but with no clear successor globally, resulting in fragmentation. The rewards remain short-term, while the likely costs may be long-term. Now, I want to say a couple of things about Trump and the G7. I think he is likely to come. We might get better information about that from other panelists. I think the lure of the international spotlight will induce him into coming, but the accompanying drama may damage perceptions of the institution. The Canadian hosts will face the challenge of running a two-track process designed to manage the drama of the personal encounter while mobilizing bureaucratic support for the written outcomes, pledges, and actions that flow from the summit. Another topic of interest here in Korea always is G7 expansion. It might happen, but if it does, how it does will also matter. The inclusion of Russia would likely eviscerate the effectiveness of the G7 in its current efforts to promote global goods. Korea and Australia are proven contributors that may enhance the G7, but I would argue only marginally in the current environment. And finally, we're waiting, as regards President Trump and APEC, to find out whether or not he might come to Korea in October. And at that time, APEC might be a venue for progress between the U.S. and China, between Trump and Xi, but it's premature to say what issues or interests may be top of mind by November. President Trump's participation will be a wild card for the region, but hopefully it can be a benefit for the U.S.-Korea relationship. My bottom line is that we are in an era in which multilateral economic cooperation is under siege and facing setbacks. Global uncertainty and volatility are at all-time highs. This is a time for vigilance and bracing for setbacks rather than one in which there are opportunities for significant progress, with due apologies to the optimism of the title of the session. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I think it was a rather sobering assessment of the prospect for international cooperation in the immediate future. But I think it was also very frank and realistic observation. And I also thank you for keeping the time limit. Our next speaker is Ambassador Jani of Indonesia.
A very good afternoon. Thank you very much, Ambassador Choi, my old friend from the G20 Sherpa Mafia. We used to work together closely in many forums. And thank you very much also for the Jeju Forum for inviting me here. Last time I was here, it was 20 years ago, I think, during Korea's APEC presidency. And I wanted very much to come back again because not only I love Korean drama, I did my studying of Jeju. I see Samdari. Is that right pronunciation? Samdari. And I was also told by my wife that Jeju's favorite color is orange, which is my favorite color. That's why I'm using this orange tie. So glad to be back here. Now, on the topic, I agree with what Scott mentioned here. It's not easy coming up with a presentation with the title Advancing Multilateral Economic Cooperation and Amid Global Uncertainty. Maybe the word that we should use is preserving, not advancing. We're at a stage now where the world is in, I should say, crisis of confidence. We are in a time where we need to work together to preserve the multilateral trading system. Something that I think is in the mind of everyone with this new Trump administration. But before going there, maybe I should give a little bit of context here, Ambassador Choi, on how I see as an old multilateral diplomat on the state of multilateralism. There is an interesting research that has been done by the Institute for Economic and Peace. They come up with a multilateral index. And there are three particular areas that they were looking at, which is the participation, inclusivity, and performance of the multilateral system itself. And from those three large picture, there are 5 elements that have been discussed, which is the question of in peace and security, public health, issue relating to human rights, climate change, and of course the last is trade. So the research is from 2013 until 2023. And from those 3 big sectors, which is on participation, there was an increase in participation from 2013 to 2023. When it comes to inclusion, there's also an increase in inclusion in the index. But interestingly, on the question of performance of the multilateral trading system, there was continued decreasing index, which shows that, okay, you have more members in many multilateral organizations, but the performance is not getting better and better. Lots of cases in the Security Council where resolution is not being adopted, particularly in the part of trade also. Another interesting part that I would like to refer to is that on the question of participation on trade, all the 4 other index, peace and security, human rights, public health, continues to rise. But on trade, it goes down. It shows that in the last few years, it's quite interesting that not only the performance, but even the participation in trading system is there. The other state of multilateralism that I would like to highlight is that, of course, everybody knows about this geopolitical rivalry. There are new emerging conflicts, protectionism, and unilateral action. Narrow interest leads to weakening of multilateral institutions. The one thing that we worry, I think, is the question of whether all these multilateral institutions will become a venue for transactional diplomacy. And that is one thing that I as a diplomat, would like to look at. At the end of the day, we look at what's happening in the world in the last few weeks. We are now experiencing tariff roller coaster, which leads also to insecurities of securities market. So it has a multiplier effect here and there. There is this cautious approach that the multilateral trading system is not working as it should be. Look at the question of enforcement of commitments. Not only enforcement of commitments, but the simple case of the dispute settlement mechanism not working in WTO anymore. My worry is also in other sectors. For instance, on the question of the Paris Agreement, as well as other agreements, people are continue to not only fulfilling their commitments, but also reneging on their commitments. Another important element on the state of multilateralism is the question of national interest to perceive global interest, and this would also impact the global public goods. I'm also afraid, to be frank, as a diplomat, Ambassador Choi, is that at the end of the day, when you have lots of crises in the forefront, we just finished with the COVID-19, and then you have the spiraling of the economies, there will be more limited financing. And at the end of the day, the one that will be impacted is those least developed countries in a sense. Because we are now pressurized also in competing for funding that are quite limited. How are we going to achieve the SDG targets when we know that there are funding that are going to settle certain conflicts in part of Eastern Europe, in part of the Middle East, and other part of the world? Now, if we look at the state of the multilateralism, then the next question that we need to ask is that, do we need to reform the global governance itself? Do we need to reform the multilateral trading system? You look at the WTO, for instance, the founding member in 1995 was 76. Now it's already more than 166. Somalia, Ethiopia is going to come into WTO this year, hopefully. The UN Charter was signed by 50 countries. Now it's already 193. So the big question is that, do we really need to reform the global governance system? Is it not working anymore? Or the other question that we need to ask is, do we need to do better in implementing all those commitments? And this leads to the other question, are we doing good things in trying to work together to save the world in global crisis? So it's a question of the substance, the rules itself. Do we want to change the rules to adapt to international and global realities of today? Or do we want to ensure that we, the membership, tries to work together? So this is another big question that I would like to pose in today's meeting. So, and the other question that I'm looking at is that there are so many organizations that are now doing a lot of things, a myriad of things, which is not in the purview of their mandate. If it's particular in their particular mandate, it's okay. But if my experience as ambassador in Geneva, which is ambassador to 40 organizations, everybody wants to do the same thing, even though it's not within their purview. SDG is being discussed in every places. G20 is discussing about security and geopolitical rivalries. Issues that are not in the core mandate of a particular organization is being discussed. So at the end of the day, diplomat will have to become an expert on everything, Ambassador Choi. And this is one thing that we have to back to try to answer the question. Is it time for us to really focus our attention what's in front of us? What is in front of us? We're having these economic difficulties in terms of trade, tariffs, and others. So not those organizations that is in charge of tariff really do something on that. And that's where the next question goes as a member of APEC, G20, where shall we do, how can we do a much better job in trying to answer all of these questions? Later on, maybe in the question and answer session, I will try to elaborate more, Ambassador Choi, so not to take the time of the other panelists in the presentation. I think I'll leave it at that by posing all these questions, because to be frank, unless we do something at the end of the day, and one thing that I would like to highlight in my last 1 minute is that we tend to focus on the two big kids in the playground. But actually in the kindergarten, in the playground, there's so many other kids that are able to play also with different choices. So you know what I'm trying to say? Yes, there is rivalry here and there, but look, what is the role for us, the middle power? What is the role for Korea? And that would be the question that I think we should try to jump into much more deeper in this discussion. I think I'll leave it at that since my time is up. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I noted that you started from very similar ground as Mr. Scott Snyder, but I appreciate that you try to give some suggestions for possible actions that we could take to enhance our chances for economic cooperation. Thank you. Our next speaker is Dr. An of Kia.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. It is my honor to participate in the forum. The international economic order faces unprecedented uncertainty, witnessing intensifying geopolitical rivalries, supply chain disruptions, the enduring impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the accelerating pace of climate change and digital transformation, all straining existing global institutions. In this milieu, understanding APEC's role is critical. My discussion will offer an analysis of APEC's unique position and Korea's 2025 chairmanship. APEC, established in 1989, aims to foster Asia-Pacific interdependence. Its objectives, from the Bogor goals to the Putrajaya Vision 2040, center on an open, dynamic, resilient, and peaceful Asia-Pacific community by 2040, driven by open trade and investment, innovation and digitalization, and sustainable inclusive growth. APEC's diverse 21 economy membership is a key strength. What distinguishes APEC? Firstly, it is non-binding, consensus-based modality. This flexibility, often seen as a soft multilateral approach, can be an advantage amid rising global uncertainties and diverging national interests, fostering candid discussion and serving as an incubator for ideas. Secondly, APEC actively incorporates non-governmental views. The APEC Business Advisory Council, ABAC, the Pacific Economic Cooperation Council, PEC, and APEC Study Center Consortium, ASCC, channel vital research and policy recommendations into APEC process. ABAC's participation, for instance, was formally welcomed at the recent ministers responsible for trade meeting, MLT, and their insights are vital. Crucially, APEC is a more rare regional forum where major powers like US, China, Japan, and Russia convene, offering an invaluable dialogue channel, particularly when other avenues may be strained by intensifying geopolitical rivalries. This function is vital for regional stability and predictability. Korea's 2025 APEC chairmanship is significant here. Its historical bilateral ties with these powers offer a unique perspective and motivation to navigate complex regional dynamics constructively. The current global landscape, with intensifying geopolitical rivalries and potential protectionism, demands adaptive navigation. APEC's role as a stabilizing force is vital. The recent APEC ministerial meetings in Korea, actually held here in Jeju a couple of weeks ago, offer a candid view. The MLT adopted a joint ministerial statement showing APEC's ability to find common ground. Ministers reaffirmed their commitment to Putrajaya Vision 2040 and expressed concern with fundamental challenges faced by the global trading system. They also recognized the importance of WTO reform to improve all its functions. Similarly, the Education Ministerial Meeting, AEMM, and the Human Resource Development Ministerial Meeting, HLDMM, also adopted joint statements signaling progress on crucial socio-economic issues. However, consensus isn't always smooth. The APEC Ocean-Related Ministerial Meeting, AOMM, issued only a chair statement. This was, as noted in the statement itself, due to one economist's withdrawal of support over its opposition to the geopolitical statement after initial consensus has been reached. Moreover, identical geopolitical caveats appeared in chair statement from the MLT, AEMM, and HLDMM. These statements typically noted that some delegations expressed views on geopolitical situations, while other members acknowledged that APEC is not a forum to resolve geopolitical and security issues, with the chair often restating the need to uphold APEC as an effective cooperation platform based on consensus as its most important tool. This underscores APEC's challenge in remaining insulated from such tensions. Reports on the MLT indicated difficulties in deriving joint statements due to some economists' opposition to previously agreed phrases, citing changed global circumstances. These internal dynamics are noteworthy. For instance, considerations regarding future APEC chairmanship, such as China's slated role in 2026, reportedly influenced negotiating stances during the recent MLT, with an eye towards continuity and future burdens. This highlights a strategic interplay between successive hosts. Furthermore, looking at how other multilateral forums navigate similar pressures, for example, Indonesia's G20 presidency in 2022 offers a valuable lessons. Despite significant geopolitical tensions, Indonesia managed to gather all G20 leaders and issue the valid leaders' declaration, demonstrating skillful diplomacy in maintaining cohesion and delivering outcomes. Such experiences provide useful insight for host economies like Korea operating in complex environment. As APEC chair for 2025, Korea, a leading middle power, is committed to revitalizing inclusive and rules-based economic cooperation. Its stated aims include strengthening regional cooperation and addressing shared challenges in the Asia-Pacific. The APEC 2025 theme, Building a Sustainable Tomorrow, Connect, Innovate, Prosper, focuses on three thematic priorities. Connectivity through a multilateral trading system, AI innovation for trading facilitation, and prosperity through sustainable trade. In line with this, Korea is actively promoting discussions on AI for trade and the digital economy, emphasizing AI's potential in customs and trade administration. Furthermore, Korea is leading discussions on building sustainable and resilient supply chains, notably through proposing and gaining support for public-private supply chain dialogues to address regional choke points and enhance connectivity. In conclusion, APEC's distinct attributes is consensus-based, non-binding approach, inclusive membership, practical cooperation focus, and active private sector engagement offer a vital dialogue space in an increasingly complex world. Recent ministerial outcomes affirm APEC's continued functionality despite geopolitical strains. Even when achieving full consensus on joint statement is challenging, The process itself demonstrates the utility of APEC's non-binding, voluntary, consensus-based approach. As 2025 chair, Korea is expected to leverage these strengths to navigate uncertainties and foster a more resilient, innovative, and interconnected Asia-Pacific, keeping APEC a relevant forward-looking platform. The commitment to generate practical forward-looking insights will be crucial for its chairmanship, potentially setting a positive trajectory for future cooperation within the region. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. An. I appreciate your explanation on the uniqueness of APEC, which is dependence on open dialogue, its flexibility, and its a focused emphasis on non-binding and voluntary commitment. I think APEC represents only a rather small part of international efforts for international cooperation. But in this time of uncertainty and difficulty, I think APEC's cooperating modality can be a useful reference for all of us. Thank you. Our final speaker is Mr. Ken England from Canada. Please.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Choi. I'm very pleased to be here, and 안녕하십니까. Thank you for having me at this prestigious forum. You've heard a number of reflections from other panelists. I think I would agree that there's not a very optimistic through line in a lot of the discussion so far about the future of multilateralism, but what I hope I leave you with here is at least a hopeful message about that future, and perhaps the imperative that, as Ambassador Nanji mentioned earlier, of seeking to preserve the multilateral system to the extent that we can. It's, I think, no exaggeration to say that multilateralism is at the very foundation of all of Canada's foreign policy since the Second World War. As a comparatively small nation, we have relied very considerably on those multilateral institutions, and in fact have helped build a number of them precisely because it offers an opportunity for collaboration and to leverage our position globally through cooperation and collaboration. But of course, as others have noted, that entire system is facing significant crosswinds internationally in many parts of the world. One need only look closer to home here in Myanmar. You have significant civil strife unfolding, clashes between Pakistan and India, escalating tensions across the Taiwan Strait, increasing efforts around disinformation, gray zone tactics. All of these different dynamics have the threat to further jeopardize the rules-based international order, and along with the peace and stability that they have underpinned for many decades, and on which Canada and many other countries have relied for their peace, prosperity, and stability. I would note as well the issue of economic policies coming out of Washington, D.C. Clearly, Canada, I think it's fair to say, has been on the front line of a lot of that. And if you know anything about our economy, it is intrinsically linked with that of the United States, so the impact has been significant. But I think equally difficult for us is that it has upended a whole set of assumptions and understandings around how rules-based trade is meant to operate in the form of CUSMA, which is the agreement, of course, which underpins our trading relationship with the United States. So it has forced us to have to look at other ways in which to work collaboratively with other partners to ensure that our trading relationships are continuing to furnish the prosperity that we expect. Closer to home in South Korea, of course, I think I must also mention North Korea as an unsettling, destabilizing force with its flagrantly violation of international rules and with global ramifications. This cuts across their weapons programs, their provocative rhetoric and military posturing, their blatant rejection of UN Security Council resolutions, and disregard for human rights. Now, I mention this not because there's anything particularly new about any of that, but what is new is that these destabilizing forces are now having international impacts. And what occurs in the Indo-Pacific has implications across the Euro-Atlantic space as well. And what I mean by that, and you're all familiar with the DPRK's support of Russia's war of aggression against Ukraine, this obviously has a direct security impact on Europe, broadly speaking. So this is another dynamic that we believe can only be resolved in some satisfactory manner through multilateral cooperation. The challenges that we're facing are significant, and I think we're at a moment now where the system that we have built over decades is under significant strain. And this imperative aligns as well with Korea's priorities under APEC. And as my colleague to my right has indicated, APEC 2025 is extremely pivotal in the context of the future of multilateralism. It's the work that is being done at APEC resonates very strongly with Canada's G7 priorities as well, which I'll touch on momentarily. Because my day job involves managing relations with South Korea, I would note as well that we see in the Republic of Korea an increasingly important partner for Canada in both bilateral terms, but across the multilateral sphere. And we have seen that relationship grow in leaps and bounds in recent years, and we have established a very detailed framework for deeper collaboration through a recent meeting of foreign and defense ministers back in November. And we only see a future of increased growth and collaboration with Korea in that space. And we will consider Korea as an increasingly important partner in ensuring the preservation of the multilateral order. But let me just get into a couple of prescriptive suggestions here for how we might seek to preserve what we have built. I would offer you three things. The first is that we should focus on the fundamentals and remember why multilateralism matters to everyone. And to sort of break that down, I would describe that as providing the means through which we can foster consensus on shared challenges, enable collective action on increasingly complex and interconnected challenges, to enhance trust among states through collaboration, engagement, and information sharing in multilateral fora. And let's be clear, this is at a time where there's a global deficit of trust, so that collaboration is increasingly important. In addition, to elevate the voices of smaller nations, which is also a significant consideration, including those in the Indo-Pacific region. Korea, while a middle power, plays an outsized role in amplifying the voices of developing economies, particularly through the APEC 2025 process. And its policy leadership in areas which have been touched on, including digital trade, innovation, and inclusive growth, are going to be important themes in that context. Number two, we see an opportunity in the growing number of multilaterals and minilaterals and see overlapping memberships as an asset. And finally, when opportunities arise and there is a need for new groups and platforms, we support their creation. For example, in 2024, Canada stepped forward to co-chair the International Coalition for the Return of Ukrainian Children. The coalition is working with 41 partner states and the Council of Europe on joint efforts to address the issue of unlawful deportation and forced transfer of Ukrainian children by Russia, which also seeks to complement existing international systems and efforts to protect children during times of war. So in sum, we're engaging in diverse multilateral platforms. Through doing this, it allows us to achieve more than the sum of our individual efforts. I would be remiss in not mentioning our hosting of the G7 presidency this year. It's the 50th anniversary of that body, and our approach to that presidency is underlined by the reality that multilateral to multilateral relations allows us to examine problems through the lenses of our friends and neighbors and to find better solutions that work for everyone. Canada is also a long-standing dialogue partner of ASEAN, a cornerstone of regional stability and cooperation. And alongside Korea, we're a founding member of APEC, which has been mentioned, bridges the economies of Asia and Pacific to the benefit of its diverse membership. We also see opportunity in the concurrent presidency of APEC by Korea and the presidency of the G7 for leveraging synergies that exist in terms of our respective priorities. There's great alignment among many of those in the AI space, in energy security, and we think there's an opportunity here to continue expanding that into the future. I will conclude by saying that Canada remains fully committed to multilateralism, partly because we feel we must, but also because we do think it provides the greater good for the greater global community. And this belief is rooted in the fact that we are a Pacific nation. We have an Indo-Pacific strategy that is 3 years in the making that reinforces that understanding and belief. And we are fundamentally focused on partnership, sustainability, and mutual respect. So I look forward to the rest of the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We know that Canada is a strong supporter of multilateralism and rule of law in international relations. So we are interested in how Canada tries to respond to the current challenges based upon its own disciplines and principles. Thank you very much to our panelists for their insightful presentations. They spoke on rather different issues, I think. For example, Mr. Scott Snyder focused largely on the state of play as far as international cooperation is concerned. And Ambassador Jani tried to give us some suggestions for improving the chances for international cooperation. And Dr. An and Mr. England gave us the example of APEC and Canada's approach as a possible modality to improve the chances for international cooperation. While they spoke on rather different issues, I think from the perspective of international cooperation, I think we were able to detect slight differences in their nuances with regard to their assessment and also prospect for international cooperation. So I would like to ask all panelists to try to respond to what other panelists spoke in their original presentation. And as I said in my introduction, I would also like to ask each of you a couple of questions. For Mr. Scott Snyder, we know that Trump administration is not very much enthusiastic about international cooperation. But at the same time, to win the strategic competition against China, the U.S. need to mobilize the support of other allies and take advantage of the groupings they established in recent years, like IPEF or Quad. So how do you think that the Trump administration will try to harmonize these two different forces of isolation and also the need to mobilize the support of traditional allies? That is my first question. My second question is, President Trump prides himself on having a rather close relationship with President Putin of Russia. And he also expressed repeatedly his willingness to sit down with President Xi of China to discuss important issues between the two countries. So do you think that these efforts of President Trump to build, to create solutions through personal relationship with other leaders will bear fruit? Or do you think President Trump has the wherewithal to establish and take advantage of this personal diplomacy? My question to Ambassador Jani is about G20, since you are old hand at G20. This year, South Africa has the presidency of the G20, and next year we start another cycle of G20 presidency with the United States as a president. So, how do you? What do you expect from South Africa's presidency of G20 this year, and what do you expect from the U.S. presidency next year? My second question is also about G20. G20 started as a framework of cooperation between developed countries and developing countries, but recently we are seeing increasing diversion within the G20. So what is your thoughts on the possibility of G20 cohesion in the immediate future? My question to Dr. An is about APEC. APEC is a rather old institution, and in recent years it has faced the criticism that it is losing relevance that can produce tangible outcome. So what do you think are the basis of this criticism, and what are the challenges of APEC in this regard, and how is APEC trying to address these challenges? My second question to you is that since Korea has Korea is hosting the APEC summit this year, can you give us some examples of a possible tangible outcome of Korea's presidency of APEC this year? Finally, to Mr. Ken England, since Canada has a G7 presidency this year, could you give us some explanation of Canada's priority on G7 presidency this year? And also, like APEC, G7 has heard criticism, especially about its representativeness or its legitimacy, because G7 is mainly G7 consists mainly of Western and European countries and represents their interests. So, what's the Canada's strategy to enhance G7's leadership of the entire global economy? And my second question is, you touched upon briefly about the possibility of membership expansion of G7, and we would appreciate it if you give us Canada's thought on the membership expansion of G7. Thank you. We will start from Mr. Scott Snyder.
Okay, well, thank you, Ambassador Chef, for those two questions. I'll first just make a comment about the panel itself. I'm happy to play the odd man out role, because I thought that one of the themes that we heard was really about middle power cooperation to uphold a rules-based order. And I don't mind at all being the foil for that particular message. I'll also just give a footnote of thanks to APEC, because I have an APEC card that lets me cut the line to enter APEC countries, and that is the most tangible benefit that I can imagine that has come from a multilateral organization at a personal level. So there are two questions here that Ambassador Che has asked, and the way that he framed it was American isolation tendency versus the need for support from allies. And I do want to push back on the concept of isolation a little bit, because what I see is what I would call Trump centrism. It's America first, not America alone. I don't think that the United States is necessarily turning toward isolation. It is that President Trump has this view of the old United States that was much more dominant and wanting to gain that same centripetal force in terms of partnership, drawing partners to the United States. But then, the other catch to that is that it always has to be on America's terms. He's always saying, any deal has a winner and a loser, and it seems to me that there are a lot of efforts on the part of him and his staff to frame the United States as the winner at all times, but that's not very good for alliance-based cooperation or for promoting the interests of the other side. And so there is a tension there, I think. And I see it as really contending impulses within the Trump administration itself. And I think that we're seeing that play out in terms of personal advisors, and I think that'll be a continuing theme. The second question is really related to the personal relationship between Putin and Xi, and whether something positive can come from, between Trump and Putin and Xi respectively, and whether something positive can come from that. It's very complicated because it does seem to be variable. Right, today it seems like Putin is not on President Trump's friend list. 2 months ago, all of our allies were exercised because Putin was at the top of President Trump's friend list. So it's hard to know from day to day. And I think that what that really underscores is that I think that what President Trump may really be about, based on his real estate career, is taking advantage of heightened risk situations in which he thinks that he can somehow profit from being willing to take higher levels of risk. And that is really problematic for partners. It's also problematic for frenemies like Xi and Putin, because they are leaders who want to manage political risk. And so that's really an interesting and complicated question. It also plays into the situation that we have with China right now. The U.S. government, I think, has moved very strongly into a rivalry orientation with China. But from day to day, we don't know if President Xi would actually make that call to President Trump, whether the whole situation might flip. And that's hard for our bureaucracy. It's also hard for allies. I really can't tell South Koreans or Japanese how to position themselves in the context of, on the one hand, responding to bureaucratic requests for cooperation on issues like export controls toward China, when there's the prospect of whiplash if President Trump decides to, or gets the meeting with Xi and goes to Beijing, and suddenly everything changes. And so I would say it's correct to focus on those relationships, because President Trump himself has been very exceedingly personalistic in his approach to diplomacy. but the effects of that, I think, are very mixed.
Thank you very much. The translators are asking you, the speakers, to put the mic closer to your mouth. Ambassador Jani.
Thank you, Ambassador Cho. I will be a little bit louder. Just to follow up on what Scott mentioned, and let me be the devil advocate here. When you mentioned on the question of, I share your points on Trump's also. It's not becoming America first as the policies. We don't mind if it's a sharing of responsibilities, sharing of contribution in international organization, for instance. But when it comes to the issue that, let's take an example on counting the tariffs that are being imposed and then delayed again, which is against the multilateral trading system rules. And that is something that we need to preserve, I mean, the credibility. I've been asked, Ambassador Choi, by many journalists in Indonesia, how do we count, how does Trump come up with the counting of the tariff? I said, only God and Trump knows, and Trump forget to tell God. So that was the question, because it was not using, as an economist, was not using the right formula. And then you have tariff on certain islands in Australia, for instance. It's illogical in a sense. But I leave it at that. And coming to what Ken mentioned also on the APEC, I just would like to add another thing. I was one of the drafter. I was the drafter of the Bogor Declaration when I was a little bit young in 1994. And it was focusing on trade liberalization, trade facilitation, and economic development. And I'm quite happy that Korea's presidency is also focused on the trade part of it. Because this is where what I mentioned in my first presentation is that those organizations that has a certain mandate, like APEC, for instance, should focus on their particular mandate. If you're talking about geopolitical rivalries and those kind of things in this type of organization, it defeats the purpose and will distract attention on addressing the real issues. And I do hope that with Korea's priorities, connectivity, innovation, and prosperities, which is all related to the trade facilitation part and strengthening of the multilateral trading system, I hope that in your presidency, you will be able to really come up with solution on how to strengthen the multilateral trading system. Because let me also be a little frustrated here. The problem that we're having in many international organizations is a cut and paste type of paragraph. So everyone is cut and paste, and you don't find solution. There are wordings on the multilateral trading system that are, what do you call it, refurbished again. I'm sorry, I don't know whether I'm using the right English language for that. And this Korea presidency of APEC is quite crucial. You know why? It's preluding the G20 presidency of the United States. So if you already come up with the right framework fundamentals in trying to go, that would come to a much easier approach in trying to find consensus in the next G20 presidency. You know what I'm trying to say, Ambassador Choi. So that's why I'm saying that your Korean presidency chairmanship of APEC is very, very important. And I do hope it comes up with problem-solving type of languages, concrete type of things. Now, I'm doing that as a prelude to your first question on how I foresee the South African presidencies as well as the G20 US presidency. I'm glad to say South Africa also focus on things that are really part of the mandate and try to also address this issue of just energy transition, for instance, the issue of disasters and the issue of critical minerals. All of those are related to the purview and mandate of the G20. But we have to be very cautious also at the end of the day. We will see in the summit how high is the level of the US representation that will be going to the South African summit. Because this is also quite important into the whole point. And whether it's going to be successful or not, and the US G20 presidency will certainly depend on several issues. For instance, whether we are really focusing on actionable, doable type of projects and activities, or are we just cut and paste languages again? I'm sorry if I'm a bit cynical there. And it also depends on whether the process becomes a transactional type of diplomacy, or really a multilateral diplomacy that address the core principle of and rules that we're trying to do. And the beauty of the G20 actually is that it's a prelude for other fora also. If we can get the consensus in G20, for instance, in the old days before we have the Ukraine issues, our finance minister are able to sit down together and settle all the financial monetary issues, the global financial monetary issues. But the trade minister, Ambassador Choi, remember, we have not come up with anything as a breakthrough for the WTO. And this is one thing that I think your presidency in the APEC will be able to be building blocks so that later on the G20 in the United States will be able to do that. So once again, I do hope that the G20, because succeed in South Africa and as well as in the United States, because when the dust settles down, this is the one effective forum that will be able to settle many of the global crises and challenges. And I come to the second question quickly there. You remember when we were discussing in Rome, we were negotiating until 4 o'clock in the morning for 4 days in a row, and coming up with a large declaration. We promised that we're going to have a short and concise declaration. It ended up with so many pages. And I remember my president asking me a simple question. When Indonesia is in the presidency, I don't want this. I want an action thing, I want simple thing, and something that are quite near and dear to the peoples of the world. But alas, the problem was we had this in February, the crisis in Ukraine. So that becomes more diverse in the sense of the G20 itself. And our presidency was in a crucial time, and we have strategized, we didn't bring our baby, we didn't bring our issues into G20 presidency. And this is the problem also sometimes with every G20 presidency. Everyone wants to bring their baby to make their domestic constituency happy. In our case, our objective was quite simple. We want to make sure that the G20 still exists. And that was a simple objective. Because at that time, even sitting down together with Russia, nobody wants to do that. Even coming up with substance, nobody wants to do that. So we were doing a lot of diplomacy with our president went to Kiev and to Moscow, our minister, finance, foreign minister, myself, we traveled all around the world just to build the trust, just to build the building blocks so that we will be able to save the G20. As I mentioned, if the G20 breaks down, then we don't have any other forum that are able to quote unquote save the world. And this is why I once again raised the issue of where Korea can play a major part as a middle power. Sometimes we tend to always focus on coalition on specific issues. Maybe it's time for us to build coalition of middle powers to save the world in the sense, not only specific type of issues, but a coalition. Because I agree with what Ken mentioned also, that should be a lot of coalition in a sense. And just to close by saying that, look, the world does not consist of two major powers. The world consists of us, all of us. And now we have to come to the forefront. And Korea can play an important part, not only in APEC and G20. We have MICTA. We work together in MICTA, for instance. Yes, there is this emerging economies grouping, but it was not intended to be something as an opposing part of the G7. No, it was intended to be working side by side to try to save the G20. So once again, this whole process of G7, G20, APEC is one whole package, you know. We were lucky in our presidencies. It was all held in the 2022 was held by ASEAN countries. We have the ASEAN East Asia Summit by Cambodia, then followed back to back with us G20 Summit in Indonesia, Bali, and followed by the Thai in the APEC Summit. So we found out that the East Asia Summit that was in Cambodia failed because of geopolitical rivalry issues. So we learned from that mistake. Immediately we turned around our process, our way of doing things, everything. So we got something, and the Thai was easier than us. They just copy what we get in the G20 in the Bali Declaration. So in short, once again, we are certainly expecting a lot from Korea. I'm not saying this because I'm in Jeju, but this is a whole gamut to try to save the multilateral system. And then we can talk about advancing. We save them first, then we advance. I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So obviously, you have a lot of expectations for Korea's hosting of APEC summit meeting this year. So, Dr. An, please.
Yeah. Well, APEC, we started in the 1989, and so it's now 25 years after its inauguration, and it has, it is evolved into a kind of, say, CPTPP and so ALSEP, some part, and there, it also pushes hard on the WTO, international, the multi-trading system. So. But recently, I think the Korean government, we work with our institute is work with several ministries in the Korean government that preparing this event this year, APEC 2025. We started in about 2 years ago, and somehow at the end of the day we set up this 2025 theme as building a sustainable tomorrow, as a connect, innovate, and prosper. So, as I told before, the connect is kind of establishing the trade linkage between the countries. So, push for a more free trade agenda. This is one thing, but the situation has been changed from, say, 1980s and 1990s, in the sense that people does not believe the strength of the free trade anymore. As an economist, I believe the strength and the fruit of the what free trade can bring to the economy. But each country suffers from internal problems. I say with the free trade, there's some growing disparity in the income inside the countries, and that makes there some political tensions inside each country. So somehow it is a little bit hard to say push this free trade and make it some agreement on that part. A little bit difficult compared to in 20 years ago. So given that situation, somehow the recent the APEC, the result is not so satisfying for some people. And there, when we start this year, the APEC, the chairmanship this year, we were thinking about how to push this agenda in more fruitful way, but this theme is prepared last year, and at the start of this year, many international situation, global situation has been changed. So this is one big challenge that the chairmanship of Korea 2025 faces right now. The second, the direction was the innovate. When you talk about the innovate, what we thought is that the AI innovation, and should be some, because this is a very early stage of technology, new technology, innovative technology, so there's many say hopes and also concerns on this technology. So throughout this year's APEC meeting, so we are thinking about, at least I think about hope for there's some consensus made on this AI, how to utilize this AI technology, and how to regulate this technology in some parts. So I think one of our, maybe if it's successful, one of the main fruit, outcome, tangible outcome of this year's APEC would be something related to AI technology and how to use it. And the third one is the prosper. So prosper, when you talk about the prosper, we had something in mind. What we had in mind is that sustainable growth, or say inclusive growth. So inclusiveness is a little bit now. This year we have big challenges from the U.S. side that they have some a little bit away from the inclusiveness. All of a sudden, this year, in the current administration. So that part is still we are working on, but a little bit difficult part. And on the sustainability, Korea and many member economies in APEC suffers from some aging population problems. Where this is one of another topic that in this year's APEC that the Korean government pushes for that. So how in the aging population, not only in Korea but in the region, in that situation, how to cooperate with each other to maintain the further sustainable growth. Okay. So, one thing that how APEC should evolve in the future. Because it is kind of the old platform in some sense. Or is this? Or the one I should say one of the big difference of the APEC, distinctive feature of APEC from other international fora is that it has a big input from the private sector. So one is that, as I said, from the business sector, from the academic sectors, and also the things. So the thing here is that from the academic sector, somehow the new generation or the new generations involvement in this forum has been a little bit slowed down. So that is something APEC Secretariat is now thinking about how to push the more active participation of the younger generation in this part. Okay, so I think that is so the things that I should say.
Thank you very much. Finally, Mr. Ken England.
Thank you again. So yes, we're looking very forward to having the opportunity to host the G7 presidency for the remainder of the year. This is the 7th such occasion for Canada, and we take the responsibility very seriously. We're also very cognizant that we're hosting the presidency at a unique time, as we've all just described. The challenges are many and vast, and the increasing challenge is ensuring that the G7 takes place and resonates with the broadest number of countries possible and demonstrates that it has impact. And so in that vein, we have taken what we call a back-to-basics approach with our presidency. And what we mean by that is to be more focused, more streamlined in terms of the priorities that we have identified for the presidency, including reducing the number of ministerial meetings. These things have kind of expanded and ballooned in recent years, and the idea is to sort of bring everything back to a more manageable position where we are working towards delivering actual impact at the end of the day. So in terms of those priorities, and I hope that what comes across is that these priorities resonate across a number of other multilateral fora, including APEC, as I mentioned earlier. The first of these is making communities safe and the world secure. That's a broad tagline which also reflects an emphasis on security issues such as in Ukraine, countering foreign interference, which has resonated very strongly in the Canadian context, but also has implications more broadly, and fighting wildfires. This is an issue of increasing concern internationally. It has impacted Canada directly, but it has impacted the Republic of Korea as well. The second priority is promoting prosperity by driving energy security and the digital transformation. This includes increasing resilience around critical mineral supply chains, AI access and adoption, and accelerating the development of quantum technologies. And the third, similar to the APEC approach, is to invest in the partnerships of the future. And what we mean by that is to help mobilize in an increasing way the private sector to support all of these priorities, including in terms of infrastructure development. So that is the overall approach. To get to the second question in terms of the criticisms of the G7 as being an exclusive elitist body, I think Those over the years have been well-founded. There has been efforts in recent years to bring other non-G7 members into the tent. But I think an important approach there is to ensure that the priorities that we identify resonate much more broadly beyond the immediate G7 membership, and that others can see themselves in the issues that we are prioritizing. And maybe just to give you a small example of what I mean by that, during our foreign ministers meeting of the G7 in March in Charlevoix, Quebec, we identified as one of the key deliverables there the Ministerial Declaration on Maritime Security and Prosperity. And this reaffirmed the G7's steadfast commitment to contribute towards a free, open, and secure maritime domain based on the rule of law that strengthens international security, fosters economic prosperity, and ensures the sustainable use of marine resources. Importantly, this was designed precisely to establish a framework that applies to non-G7 partners as well, including countries that host major ports, large merchant fleets, countries with extensive flag registries, as well as relevant regional and international organizations such as the IMO and ASEAN. And so this is an approach that we will apply to the summit as well next month, again with the three priorities that I've just identified. And finally, with respect to the question around G7 expansion, Canada does not have a defined position on this, or formal position, but I do think I can say with confidence that we will not be opening the door to Mr. Putin anytime soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Well, we had a very interesting discussion so far, and the time is now 6:30. We were asked to finish our session by 6:40 because some of us have to attend the dinner hosted by the chairman of the organizing committee at 7. I'm afraid that we do not have sufficient time to engage with the floor. So with your permission, I'd like to wrap up this session. But before doing so, let me give a few observations regarding our discussions. I think that all panelists more or less agreed that it is indeed a very difficult time for multilateral economic cooperation. But there were some differences in nuances and emphasis. I think that Mr. Scott Snyder was relatively more pessimistic about the prospect of international cooperation in the near future. The other three speakers were not optimistic either about the prospect, but I think I can say that they were less pessimistic than Mr. Snyder. And they tried to see some way forward, including through the international institutions like G7, G20, APEC, and other international groupings. And as part of the possible solutions, we heard suggestions for reform of the global governance structure, revisiting the multilateral rules, and making changes in international institutions. They are necessary elements for our effort to improve international cooperation. But at the same time, we are also painfully aware that in view of the persistent rivalry and distrust among major powers, to achieve these objectives will take a very long time. So in the meantime, my personal thought is that when these grandiose changes are difficult to come by, perhaps it is wise for us to concentrate our efforts on functional, issue-specific international cooperation. I would like to note that Dr. An made a passing remark about APEC's work on supply chain resilience, digital trade rules, and green economies. And also, Mr. Ken England of Canada stressed importance of working in the framework of minilaterals, plurilateral groupings. We should not have too much expectations from the work in these areas. In the first place, they are not intended to bring radical changes in international governance. Their work have only incremental impact on specific areas. But I think that the fact that we have to concentrate on these areas, on these modalities, are the realities of the world in which we are living. And with this, I'd like to finish our discussion. Once again, I'd like to thank the panelists for their valuable contribution to our discussion, and I also would like to thank the audience for their attention. Before closing, I'd like to ask to give a big hand to our panelists. Thank you.